Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. As many of our listeners know, I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator, investing in entrepreneurs building in Web3 and enabling the next wave of growth in the decentralized internet and in tokenized economies. Applications are now open for our spring 2025 class, so check out techstars.com/accelerators/web3 to apply. Alejandro Gutierrez, CEO of InPayMe Labs, Techstars All-Star Mentor, and co-founder of ETH Dublin, joins me again as guest co-host this week. In this episode, we talk through the takeaways of our recent panel on finding Web3 talent at Dogpatch Labs in Dublin, touching on market sentiment, the cyclical nature of crypto investments, and strategies for early-stage startups. We delve into the concept of real-world asset tokenization, highlighting key initiatives by firms like Provenance, PayPal, Circle, and Centrifuge. The conversation also covers the evolving landscape for content creators in Web3, emphasizing the use of tokenization for new revenue streams and the role of AI in content creation. So dive right in with Alejandro Gutierrez and me, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. Alejandro Gutierrez, welcome back to the show, pal.
Really happy to be here again.
Great to have you here. And you and I had a good chat last week at Dogpatch Labs at finding Web3 talent. That was your turn on the moderation.
Yeah, I've done a few instances of moderation before. It definitely requires way more practice than being seated on the hot chair. I think it's interesting. For our session, it was extremely easy because everybody there was so talented, so experienced, right? So the conversation and the flow was extremely easy to manage and handle.
Oh, you did an awesome job. You did an awesome job. It's just like making sure you're handing it off and getting people involved. And that's the most important thing, because the last thing we want is just one hairdryer speaking the whole time.
It's steering the conversation back when sometimes people tend to go on tangents or things like that. So rein it in a little bit.
And what would be the basketball position that would be most reminiscent of the moderator role?
Has to be number one, the point guard.
Exactly.
The guy that's calling all the shots and the moves, and that's the one.
Yep. Did you play point guard?
I used to play point guard and shooting guard. That was the two ones. I was too short to play any other position, unfortunately. Yeah.
And you're not that short.
I'm not that short, but when you start going into those levels, like you're 6'2", you're short. That's the reality.
All right. Well, listen, at this event, as you know, we had Dr. Paul Dillon Ennis, who is a professor at UCD, and he covers a lot of the crypto and blockchain curriculum. We had Fiona Delaney, who is also part of the Blockchain Ireland Startups Working Group with you. Yep. And she is at Origin Chain.
Origin Chain, yeah, she's working there. Like that's her project. And she's also involved in C blocks.
That's right. And then we had Cormac Dinan, who is the country manager for Coinbase in Ireland. And shout out to Cormac. He and I go way back. And then, so finally, we had Owen Healy from Owen Healy Blockchain Talent. And he is a recruiter, getting people into this space. And I think that was the whole idea of the chat. And Owen Healy then put up a wonderful summary on LinkedIn of the discussion with some of the key points that I wanted to rattle through some of them with you. With everybody that we had on the panel, we had a whole bunch of different perspectives. And I think you started off by asking me, oh, hey, Pete, what's the market sentiment out there right now? The answer I gave you, I caveated later. And what I wanted to do was to get this right, okay? And that what I said to you about the market sentiment was that it's very touch and go right now. And that we've got a lot of the early stage investment in Web3 that is driven by what's the price of Bitcoin? What's the price of ETH? What is the market cap of crypto overall? Is that up? Is that down? How are people feeling about it? And what I kind of came back and said later on is that there's two layers to this. There's two levels to Web3. There's, if we look back to some of the mature players in crypto, if we look at the mature players in crypto that have been around for the last 10, 12 years, that they're very much in a cycle of growth and long-term growth. And yeah, there's going to be ups and downs in the price of crypto, but they've been weathering that for the last 10, 12 years, right? The other side of it is the early stage, and where so much, like I said, of that early stage funding activity is dependent upon how people are feeling about the crypto markets. I had one founder who's one of their lead investors just basically pulled the plug over the
Yeah,
summer
correct.
because the markets were moving too sideways and they were unsure about making more investments and making more allocations.
Yeah,
And it's like, okay, if those kinds of things are happening right now, then yeah, it's a bit touch and go in the market right now. But I'm sitting next to Cormac Dinan from Coinbase, and it's like, well, listen, we're on this upward trajectory, and we've got all of this institutional interest and institutional projects that are building in this space, and so many things that are happening that it's not really touch and go. It's kind of build and grow, build and grow, build and grow. Do it smartly, but that we are definitely in a growth phase right now.
Yeah, that was a good post yesterday. Jesse Pollock, actually, about this. He was saying, sideways market build. Everything is built, right? Like this is the time to build. The problem with that is, yeah, it's easy when you are Coinbase, when you are Base, when you are Solana, when you are the projects that are really well funded. But what happens actually with the startups that are just to that path of growth? Because the problem is if the whole investment thesis, right, from VCs is about a token price and extracting liquidity out of the market as quickly as possible, this is not going to be too relevant for too long.
Yeah, it won't. And I'm just thinking back to the thesis that Hugh McGurr and I recently updated for Techstars Web3, in that we're not talking about Bitcoin prices. We're not talking about Ethereum prices. We're not talking about the price of any crypto asset. We're talking about building things at the infrastructure layer, building things at the application layer, building things at the protocol layer, building things that will bring more users on chain, and helping to address this age-old problem of this imbalance between user experience and security, right? And I just said that 5 or 6 times. It didn't feel like we were in that cycle yet, though. I think that was the point, right? In that we had the rally towards the end of last year, we had the Q1 rally this year, and then moving sideways since then. And it just doesn't match up with any of the prior kind of 18-month run-ups, that we've seen before. And who knows where things are going to go the rest of this year. The point of this, having this part of the conversation featured in a conversation about Web3 talent last week, was to say that, listen, it's a young industry. We're still subject to the ups and downs in the markets, very much like people 24 years ago, hiring or not hiring, or growing or not growing based upon what was going on with the price of .com stocks, and whether they could use options as an incentivization mechanism to hire people. In this case, we're looking at, can you use a token to incentivize people to come on board?
There's no doubt about that. But I think the big problem that we have is from the educational perspective, especially you're going to bring someone that is in the Web2 space and the traditional space, right? Because probably they don't even know how a token works.
No, they don't.
So the thing is like, okay, we're going to be incentivizing people with tokens, but probably the first respondent to that would be people that are already into the Web3 space. So how are we going to use, going back into UI, UX and experience, how are we going to just make that experience so easy that we can just bring someone and say, look, we want to have tokens here. That's part of the compensation. That's where the really upsell is. And the real benefit will be, it's not going to be your salary. It's the fact that as an ecosystem, as a community, this goes well. Everybody is going to be benefiting from it, right? But we need to make it really easy. And what I may say is you have a wallet, that wallet is connected. You're going to be able actually to use those tokens in a seamless manner and get fiat when you need to get fiat, or use them for purchases when you need to just get purchases. So then everybody needs to pay rent, everybody needs to pay mortgages, everybody needs to eat. That's kind of one of the questions, right? When people are coming into the space. And I think there was some of those points that Owen summarized well. So there is still, people are still kind of deterred and scared of coming to the space because they believe the risk is extremely high.
Yeah, they do. And I think it's everyone's looking at it in the same light, but there are at least two layers of the market here. And that was the
Correct.
point that I kept saying after I kind of steered things the wrong way at the beginning of the discussion. But educating people on the different layers of the market is so critical because it all comes down to someone's risk appetite when they're looking about coming into the market. Going to work for a brand new startup, there's no absolute that there will be money in 6 to 9 to 12 months time to pay you, and you need to be in a position where you can live with those ups and downs. That's if you're coming into this early stage startup layer. If you're thinking about Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini as an entry point into Web3, if you're coming into the mature layer of crypto with these players that have been around for 10 to 12 years, it's a bit more stability there. Nothing certain, but I think, like you said, it's about education and getting people up the curve here and understanding how this market actually works. And I just keep coming back that it's a very small industry right now. One of my latest favorite market monitors is Grow the Pie, literally as it's spelled, growthepie.xyz. And it shows you the daily active addresses on chain and carve out all of the centralized crypto exchanges and the 3 to 4 to 5 to 600 million users of those. This is daily on-chain users of decentralized applications, or dApps as they're called. And there's 1.3 to 1.5 million daily active addresses. It's tiny. It's tiny. It's so small. And yet the media attention on this, and it is just totally out of proportion for what people actually do every day and how they're using this every day. And I'm trying to think about other technological innovations or user experiences on the internet that have grown. And the only one I can really hold up is social media, right? Where we're 2, 3, 4 billion daily active users. Okay. And so we've got a long way to go here. What keeps me moving is that this is just the next version of the internet. More people will come working in here. The rampant speculation will eventually level out. But this is just, like you and I talked about before the event, Alejandro, it just comes down to education, opening people's eyes to this industry and aligning risk appetites with the reality of the opportunity for people. I think that's
correct.
Yeah,
I think it's time to stop looking at the technology as this esoteric mean, right? That is going to just give us the solution to all the problems of the world.
Yep, absolutely.
It's just implement the technology as every single other technology that is there, as AI, quantum computing, where it's a little bit more advanced. That's it.
Yep, absolutely. And the fact that the event was sponsored by the Fidelity Center for Applied Technology, FCAT, and shout out to Aaron Smith and Frank Friel and all the folks who get involved with that.
Richard Murphy as well.
Yeah, Richard Murphy, absolutely. They've been one of the early entrants to this space years ago, Fidelity. And I remember when Abby Johnson, the CEO of Fidelity, I don't know, back in 2017 was up there talking about this and talking about crypto, talking about the application of cryptographically secured assets into traditional finance. And I got very excited back in 2017, 2018 when this happened. And I remember creating a one-page slide for the deck that I used in a lot of the presentations I did to educate people about this space that showed all of these brand names from traditional finance or TradFi that were getting involved and setting up crypto trading desks or doing experimental bond issuances on a blockchain, private or public, usually private. And that was 2017. And then not that things went quiet, but I think that became, okay, well, we're realizing that we've got a lot of folks that are experimenting and doing a few things here, but the ups and down cycles and the different media events that happen and all those types of things definitely slowed things down a bit. But it feels like over the course of the last year or so, and Alejandro, when you and I first met, it was on the basis of real world assets and tokenization and talking about those types of things at different conferences. And there is a lot of energy and momentum moving towards, we've got these two layers. We've got the early stage layer. We've got this more mature layer. We've got TradFi that's coming in, perhaps is this third layer.
No doubt, you're seeing more and more. of that, right? Which is good. But I think at the same time, opens questions in regards to, okay, is this technology going to be used just to kind of restructure the old ways of financial systems, right? Without realistically adding any benefit for the common job.
Yeah, that's where I'm kind of like, all right, where is the place that you start? Where did we start the internet? That was on digitalizing information, digitalizing media. All right.
Yeah,
And now we're just at a phase where we're digitalizing commerce and finance and doing that through the third version of the internet rather than 1.5 to 2 back in the late 90s, early thousands when we got into the kind of social media phase back in, the early 2000s, mid
correct.
2000s. So it starts with money. It starts with Bitcoin. It starts with internet money and the financial rails. And we've got those up and running, but then because of the transversal nature of the technology, that you can engage in what I just call trustless value transfer for non-financial assets. One of the more recent kind of examples of this just to connect these two dots here of people moving over from traditional finance. We've got Owen Motherway. He's taken a keen interest in real world asset tokenization. He comes from the funds industry like me, and he sees, well, the funds industry needs to get their head around this. They've been talking about it for a long time,
Correct.
but so he posted up on LinkedIn just last week, and he's doing this frequently now. I think it's every Friday, a whole list of these similar names from, 8, 9 years ago that I was seeing that are now doing more things with tokenizing real
Yeah.
world assets. And he put up a list of about 10, 12, 15 different examples of this just to point out, hey, this is real, this is happening. And there was a number of them that I kind of wanted to pull out and chew on a bit.
You know what is really interesting, Pete? I remember we were starting with all that RWA movement in 2018, 2019, right? And you were seeing one article a month was a lot, and it was a
Yep.
lot of exposure, right? And look at where we are at now. Like you have there, probably 20 different pieces of media.
Yeah, it's flying. It's flying. And this is, so Owen Motherway, he's a director to funds and to fintechs, as he calls himself. And so he's pushing this content out just to open people's eyes up about it. And I'm like, where did he get all this? Okay. Is he going through and tracking? And I know he's a listener, so he'll probably come back and tell us, Alejandro. But
Yeah,
is he tracking all this and taking diligent notes and keeping a list? And I found this great app called Recall where you
really
can,
cool.
yeah, check it out, where it's just a Chrome plugin on your browser. And when you see something that you want to remember and recall, and not just stick into your bookmarks, which gets totally overflown with everything. Recall gives you a nice visual way to do that. And it has this AI bot that runs on top of it and summarizes the post for you. Okay. So
Great.
he's not using Recall yet. I don't think he is, but Owen, have a look. This might make your life a bit easier. One of the articles that we're about to talk about referenced rwa.xyz. And I looked at that. And if he had found that before, he would have got a whole list of some of these things that are happening. So anyway, the one that I wanted to start with was Provenance Blockchain. So Provenance Blockchain Labs launches a fund issuance platform to tokenize, list, and lend real world asset funds on Figure Markets. That's a mouthful. What does that mean? That was on Market Watch on the 20th of August. So Provenance built their blockchain.
Yeah.
Figure built the Provenance blockchain years ago and then spun it off. And now it's its own blockchain ecosystem run by Tony Morrow or Anthony Morrow, formerly of BNY Mellon. And listened to a podcast with him last month that was very educational and helpful to learning about Figure, learning about Provenance. And I'll put that one up in the show notes. But what they're doing is something that I've got a ton of familiarity with, which is enabling investment funds to be used as collateral on chain and for lending. And that I used to do this at BNP Paribas back in 2007, 2008, 2009, where hedge fund assets were being used as collateral for lending to funds who bought hedge fund assets and just would hold hedge fund shares. And so you put a lien on the hedge fund shares, and that those are valued on a basically on a month-to-month basis, if you're lucky, sometimes weekly. And the ups and downs in that would impact how much you could borrow, how much that fund of funds, as they were called, could borrow. So now we're seeing Provenance doing something similar and offering a similar facility. It's nice to see. It's blockchain based, wonderful. Figure markets are the gatekeeper, though. They talk about it being decentralized, not really that decentralized,
Yeah.
because you still have a gatekeeper there. So, but yeah, this one was interesting, and I caught a hold of it because it was something that I've got a lot of familiarity with from the old days. But it is basically an institutional gatekeeper type framework that
It's just the next iteration, right?
Yep.
So starting seeing these guys suddenly more comfortable transacting on blockchains, tokenizing assets, and having those digital versions for financial purposes. Right. I see at some point when they are more familiar and more comfortable with the technology, and especially with the regulatory framework that is telling us you can use CK and you're going to be covered.
Yep.
You probably don't need that gatekeeper any longer. But I would see those gatekeepers there for some time.
And we will have that. And Aave were one of the first ones to go do something similar with Aave Arc. We talked about that before on this podcast. I'm not sure where that is today. It does still exist. I'm not sure how much it's used, but you've got to think at some point we're going to have more institutions coming in and building in this space and working on things. So it's great to see Provenance doing this. A couple of the other ones, PayPal stablecoin hits a $1 billion market cap. Wonderful. Great. More of a bridge. And more of a bridge between TradFi and crypto. Wonderful.
Yeah, crypto,
people can recognize this PayPal name that they trust in this trusted brand that now have a stable coin, what is it, PYUSD, that has reached $1 billion in market cap. Wonderful. That seemed like that's a good story that I think will continue. MakerDAO, I know one of your favorites. They rebranded as Sky to roll out their new stablecoin, USDS, one of the original or the OG stablecoin DAI that will now be known as USDS, which I love the name DAI. One of my sisters is named DAI. So did you have any insight on this, given that some of your historical closeness to MakerDAO?
When in doubt, rebrand. There you go. That's the same thing they needed probably to refresh a little bit, left behind a little bit of the controversy with some of the decisions taken near past. So I think that's kind of what they're trying to do.
The other one that you're going to be very familiar with is Centrifuge. They launched a real world asset lending market leveraging tokenized US Treasury bills. What's going on with that one?
So I think it's really good to see the evolution, right, of these ecosystems and the integration of multiple players that they are playing different roles in that decentralized ecosystem. And this is great to see, right? Because realistically, how are we going to be able to use decentralized most possible of these processes? It was extremely difficult. Right? It was extremely difficult. But now that you are starting seeing the pattern, I think that's when Centrifuge are doing a fantastic job as always on this space. They have been one of the leaders in there, and it's great to see.
It is. We're bringing trusted names.
Correct.
That the U.S. Treasury bills and BlackRock and Fidelity and PayPal and you name it. And
all of that there. So I think the interesting piece in here, what is going to happen when interest rates are going lower? That the market starting draining out. What is the play in there? Just moving those funds into the liquidity pools and the credit pools for lending purposes.
I know. And even things as simple as USDC, which you can get 4 to 5% on right now in yield.
Correct.
The USD Circle stablecoin. And I had generated some liquidity, shall I say, to pay for some new bathrooms in my house. Yeah. And it's taking longer than I thought it would to get that all set up. And so that was just sitting there in cash. And I'm like, I'm going to dump it all into USDC just for 6 months. But you're right. What's going to happen when interest rates start getting cut? That these little yield opportunities are going to go away. But I mean,
it's going to be the appetite of people for that.
Yeah.
And the appetite of the big organizations that are kind of backing these developments. Where are they going to move next?
They will. Some of the others that jumped out.
But I don't know if you saw yesterday, And there was a really important announcement by USDC that they are now native on Brazil and Mexico.
They are.
Yeah, they
I
are.
missed that.
Yes. Check it. It's a big one because those two countries only 360 million people, more or less. And they are fully integrated actually into the systems from the government,
Holy
like
shit.
Pixel and Semi Mexico. It is massive. This is huge.
Okay, I'm looking at this. Using Brazil's
But
PIX, PIX,
PIX,
which I've talked about on this
it
podcast
is
before
amazing. It's a different level, I think. Huh?
with yeah, that's going back a ways. And I remember, I think it might have been Facebook were shut down. No, WhatsApp payments were shut down because in Brazil, because PIX was going to be getting off the ground, and the authorities in Brazil were like, no, we need to give this thing a
Yeah.
chance before we let WhatsApp payments come in.
Yeah.
But now, and this quote says from this Altcoin Buzz article, in a nutshell, companies can now get USDC right from their own country's currency.
Correct. So it's native. That's massive. That's huge. So you can just now suddenly get these in reais and in Mexican pesos.
Wow. Okay. All right. No, that's big. And this is going to be captured. There was the Castle Island Ventures recently put out their most recent stablecoin paper, which was looking at emerging markets. And they put this out just last week, I think.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have captured this news in that. I was about to read it this morning, but I'm going to go back and check it out.
It's really good paper. Really good.
All right. Yeah, that's big. I mean, one of the original real world asset tokenization stories is the US dollar.
Yeah.
That is a real world asset. It has been tokenized. It's been tokenized for a long time. And so many folks just don't know that these things even exist.
Yeah. Right. In those countries, right? Like an opportunity. It is not an easy task, right? Convert dollars, it is difficult. So this will open all sorts of opportunities for people and normal people as well.
Definitely. That is exciting. Thank you for pointing that one out. Yeah. That one will make it into the show notes as well. So there was probably about 6 or 7 other that Owen Motherway put into his post. And there were 2 that had to do with bond issuances by corporates, which I'm like, okay, wonderful. They've been doing that for a long time.
Siemens. And I saw one from Siemens.
One from Siemens, one from Natixis.
Yeah.
We've got Aave onboarding the BITL shares, the BlackRock Universal Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund, right?
Yeah.
So the tokenized US Treasury Fund, as we've been talking about, that can now be used as collateral for the Go stablecoin on the Aave network. So wonderful. That adds more liquidity. I had a look at the BITL fund. Again, that's the BlackRock tokenized US Treasury Fund, now at $500 million. Wow. So that's gaining steam, not gaining the same kind of steam the crypto ETFs are, have gained, but we got to think about where the money's coming from. So that one was an interesting one. Last one I wanted to cover today, Alejandro, was moving off of the Owen Motherway's post, was to a post that you put up just yesterday. And it was on content creators, and it got me thinking. And what you said was that content creators, the landscape is changing fast. Many are facing challenges like platform algorithms, shrinking revenue shares, and now the rise of AI-generated content, making it even harder to stand out. Web3 offers a way forward by giving creators ownership of their work and enabling direct engagement with their audience. It provides new opportunities to differentiate and monetize in a space where authenticity matters more than ever. As the digital world evolves, it's worth exploring how this shift can benefit you. And that really resonated with me because I've been leveraging AI a lot more recently in terms of how I do things for this podcast. And when I saw that and seeing how much content that AI can generate for you, that those that are actually creating it themselves with their own creative nature and minds, that how are we going to really distinguish between the two anymore?
Would people actually be more drawn to, this is actually not AI generated? Do people really care? That's a good question. I don't know.
When it comes to music, I care, right? And live music.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't want to go to the 3 Arena or the Olympia Theater and see a machine up there on stage just generating music.
Yeah.
Now, some people that may float their boat, but for me, it's not that interesting. And okay, I think we're not there
Yeah.
yet. Well, there are some instances of AI generated music where, I think it was Oasis spelled with OAISIS, where they just took the Gallagher brothers' voice frequencies and used
Oh,
AI to generate some new songs, right? And we're not there yet. But when it comes to reading content, reading newsletters, reading blog posts, catching up with everything that's going on, you just want some type of human thought going
indeed.
into this with something that makes it more entertaining to
Correct.
read. Could AI do this? Absolutely. But I think the point is that content is a real world asset. And there are ways to tokenize content to make sure that we are pointing out the difference between what's real and what's AI generated. Yeah.
And that's a fantastic point, right? Because at the moment, a lot of the focus is on real world assets in the financial space, right? But digitization of assets is simple. Is you're just creating a digital form of something that exists in the real world. And you can use that for financial gain purposes and so on. So excuse my plug here, but that's one of the things that we're trying to do in Payme, right?
Yep.
So it's like, okay, how we can help these content creators, right? Or brands, smaller brands have similar problems. So how are we going to help these people to create different revenue streams to what the traditional industry is giving? So token gating is a fantastic example. You can create so many different engagement experiences for your customers in order to increase loyalty. And then if on top of that, you gamify that experience, that engagement, well, now you're being kind of unique, right? You're trying to be different. That's kind of the way that we are seeing it. And what is interesting, Pete, like 5 years ago, you would have asked me what was going to be kind of the key to open the gate to mass adoption in the crypto space and Web3 space. Hands down, I would have said that was the real world assets in the financial space.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize now that it's not. I think it's still really niche. It requires a lot of knowledge still for people to understand what is happening. But what I believe is content creation probably is the way that we're going to get into the next billion users. I think the transition is easier for people.
It's like Hugh McGurk says, meet people where they are, and where they are right now is that they're consuming content on a whole bunch of different platforms. How do we provide more benefits to that community?
Yeah.
Not that community, that huge slice of the population, the quarter of the world's population, or even pushing towards half that are using this every day? And how do we make it more valuable for them and say, well, listen, what we say about AI is that there's so much that it can do for us, but what we don't want it to do is what humans are really good at: building relationships, creating, all those types of things.
Exactly.
So I think this is
use it for what it is, right? Like, okay, instead of sitting down and spending X amount of time creating posts, why you don't get that help from AI in order to just optimize some of those processes, get ideas, and then focus on what you're good at.
Yep.
What is that engagement with your fan base, creating the content, right? Like, and then if on top of that, you have that tokenization layer that is going to allow you to just get this into a different level from the loyalty perspective, from the engagement perspective. Well, that's fantastic. That's how we should be using technology.
I'm with you. I'm with you. All right. Well, that's a good place to close it out on a high note.
Yes, sir.
We started with Web3 talent, worked our way through real world asset tokenization, and opened people's minds a bit, and hopefully also open up the definition of real world asset, include things that are important to the human spirit as well. So thank you, Alejandro. It was a wonderful chat.
Thank you, sir.
And I will.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you. That does it for this week, folks. And you can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. Thanks to Alejandro Gutierrez for all the insights he shared in co-hosting this episode with me. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps others to find the show. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. Applications are open now for our spring 2025 class, so check us out on techstars.com/accelerators/web3 to apply. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.